So welcome everybody to our Women and Leadership. This is series 1. This year in the beginning, this is ground floor. This is super exciting. And when I was thinking about what is this going to look like and who would I love to connect with, another powerful woman, the first person that came to mind was Casey. Casey is one of the most powerful women that I've ever met in terms of, her leadership style. She has devoted the last decade in personal growth and development, and definitely has carried that over into, the business world. She's accomplished so many things in terms of launching the company that she's with on a nationwide into other countries. And she's just been such a phenomenal inspiration and role model for me as a woman in business. And so I'd love to just kind of open up the conversation a little bit. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you, Casey, so we all have perspective on what you've done and the work that you've been involved in. So let's start off with that.
All right, sounds great. Well, first and foremost, thanks for the invitation to be here. I feel absolutely no pressure about having an amazing interview, being the first one in the series that you're launching and the first person you thought of. Oh my goodness, can we end the call now? However, we're going to jump in and move into it anyway. For those of you that I might be meeting for the first time, I'm born and raised in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area native. And some of you heard my story before, others of you not. I realized at a very young age that I did not want to be employed by anyone else because I didn't like asking permission for time off or negotiating my value and getting raises and all of that stuff. I really wanted to just be in charge of my own life and my own future. And if it's going to succeed, it's because of me. And if it's not going to succeed, it's because of me. And really be able to be more of an influence in the direction of what was going to happen in my life. So I've been an entrepreneur. I started my first business at 19. I'll be turning 47 in May of 2022. And I won't get into all of the 3 different business sectors that I've been in, but here's what I've learned over the course of those years is that a couple of things. If there's a will, there's a way. She or he who is most certain will always win, and that there is nothing that is impossible to create. And it doesn't matter if you create it and you lose everything, you just start off that much further ahead because you know how to get up and go back out and recreate. And so I particularly love the opportunity to be in a conversation about women and empowering women. And we'll talk a little bit because this is going to go sideways. I can just feel it coming. It's going to go sideways at some point, Rosie, because I'm going to be very controversial in this call. And I gave you a little text heads up, but I'll do it nicely. But empowering women, because there's so many different roles and aspects that we choose to step into in our lives. And sometimes we don't really realize how actually influential and powerful and the contribution that there is for us to make, because I think that women, a lot more than men, in my experience, will compare themselves to or be, in a situation where we're looking at what everyone else is doing and constantly rating how do we stack up. Many of the men that I know don't think that at all. They're just like, I'm awesome and I'm gonna go get it, and he's doing it, and cool. How do I figure that out? It's like I've noticed consistently that is one of the just a different conversation that kind of seems to enter the arena. I don't know why, however, I've just noticed it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Casey. And I would agree with you. And by the way, ladies, we have about an hour together. It's going to be a little bit of a conversational type style. There's going to be a bunch of questions. If you have specific questions that you have, make sure that you put it into the chat box, and so we can kind of cover that. But I would agree with you, Casey, that there's definitely a different dynamic that I've experienced. And I think that the one thing, if there were one thing, Casey, that you would say has been one of your most successful tools in your toolbox in your career, in terms of going from where you started to what you've accomplished, working with men, working with women, what has been that that mindset tool, that strategy, that beingness that has really helped, or maybe that has been the most challenging that you've had to master?
So this might sound kind of funny. However, my biggest challenge has been learning how to work with women. And this is why I say that, is that we, from as long as I can remember growing up, like most of my closest friends were men. And then, I was kind of, I think I'm like the most approachable, soft, tender person on the planet. And then I would get feedback that, no, you're kind of scary. And it was like, oh my gosh, that must be you, because that's totally not me. And so I think that there's a couple of things. First off, Rosie, like in business, and as I was doing business and learning and working and growing, I was naturally drawn to work with men, because I just wanted to I liked the directness. I liked that I felt like I knew where I stood. And that was my experience often in working with men. And I loved working with men because of that. However, I am a woman, and I did not have great working relationships with women as I look back years ago, nor did I have the interest in developing a skill set around that. And it was just like, I didn't have the skills, and I just was like, there's plenty of men to work with, and I will just focus and do that because I liked the style of working. Now, here's what I didn't know at the time that I have come to learn since then as a result of doing personal development. I want to take the men and women conversation completely off the table, because I think whenever we label somebody or something, that in our minds, whatever that label is associated with in our minds, there's a certain set of behaviors or experiences that we then come to expect whenever we label it. And we live in a world that is like gung-ho on labels. Men, women, now there's pronouns. Like everybody wants a label so they can feel safe and then know who their people are, and then want to be treated a certain way or dealt with in a certain way based on whatever label we're going to choose to give ourselves. And this is the controversial part that, obviously these are real topics and real conversations that are going on in the world today. But I mean, at the end of the day, what we all are is we are human beings. And what I learned about myself through like years and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of personal development and really diving into that is, regardless of what label we're going to put on the human, is that we all are human beings, and we have that as a commonality. And human beings are geared and wired and designed all specifically. There's commonalities between all of them, and then there's nuances, and this is where like behavioral style assessments come into play. Some of you that, a lot of people on this call are in real estate. And so if you've been with like companies like Keller Williams, and they talk a lot about the DISC, and how to understand behavior and what drives people and what motivates people and those, characteristics. But that's just another set of labels. There's an author that I love called Benjamin Hardy he says this. He says, don't ever take a behavioral style assessment, because you will put yourself in a box and justify or rationalize whatever comes out of that assessment and create your own limits, perceived limits, or other things based on that. So the tool, what's the tool? The tool is being open. That's the bottom line. It's so as my experience is, the more we learn, the more we grow, the more we have experience in life, the easier it is to become positioned. And when we become positioned, we become inflexible. And when we become inflexible, the world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And so in this idea about, I know there's a lot of, and probably the majority of the women on here are already entrepreneurs or considering entrepreneurship or going into entrepreneurship. Flexibility and the absence of being positioned, I think, is the number one thing that leaves us open to staying learning based, to be able to see and get value from any situation, whether we perceive that situation as positive or negative or good or bad. Being open, being flexible, and not being positioned. And I probably sound positioned as I'm saying all of this. And that in itself is a position. Isn't that funny?
So your position is that we are flexible. Yeah, you know what? I think that that's a really, really important point. And I think along with that, in terms of flexibility, it's also staying in curiosity, right? Because I think if you're curious about the other person's perspective, about, their view, what pair of glasses are they wearing? If you are curious, genuinely curious, as opposed to automatically kind of jumping into your label of why this person is saying this, or why this interaction is going in this way, or whatever the case may be. As you are involved in your business dealings and your client dealings and, your leadership experiences, staying curious anytime there's a new challenge, whether that's and I love that you said, Casey, that we're all humans. And I agree 100%, because in reality, some humans have more masculine energy and some humans have more feminine energy.
Which is why they say that Rick is a great wife and I make a great husband. I'm constantly working on expressing more of my feminine energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of circles to something you said, when you were just kind of organically growing and everything, you were just drawn to the masculine naturally. It wasn't like you were being selective. It's just like, this is what worked, right? The masculine interactions, because you operate probably from a more masculine standpoint, masculine being, and let's kind of get into that. That's a good kind of segue. You operate a little bit more from, what'd you say?
My neck's turning red. I have a turtleneck. Okay, let's go there.
So, operating from a masculine, operating from a feminine, right? If you're drawn to the whole feminine, if you tend to kind of operate from a feminine, then you're probably going to be drawn, again, in your interpersonal relationships, in your business relationships, you may have, a stronger connection with other feminine energies. And if you're masculine and you're operating from the masculine, then you might be drawn to the masculine. But let's elaborate on what we're talking about, when we say feminine and masculine. For me, my first, primitive thought is masculine being, like on a girl, it means you're tough and you're rough. And, that's what I think of. That's what, like, again, from a very simplistic standpoint. And then feminine means like, the guy's like this. So that is not what we're talking about. And I wanted to just throw it out there for those of you that were thinking that in your brain. Casey, let's jump into, what do we mean by, what are the traits that are exhibited or experienced in a masculine role or energy?
Yeah, so I'm going to just talk about what my experience is versus thinking that I'm here to educate anybody on what it actually means, because I think everybody's going to have a different experience of it. So my experience is that I had gotten feedback for a long time that I had, what would be considered as masculine energy, kind of more driver energy, dominant, let's get stuff done. I was more like transactional and efficient based versus being relational and how's everybody feeling about the experience that we're in together. And what I discovered is that I developed an incredible skill set in business utilizing masculine energy, because it helped me stay focused. When I would have, emotions that would come up, I would go, okay, great, I felt that, but now it's time to get something done. So I'm not taking a week off to go have a pity party for myself because there's stuff to do, right? So what I experience as the masculine energy side of myself, the clarity, the decisiveness, the not caring if people don't like me, the ability to say no, like those skill sets really helped me in business and being an entrepreneur, because it helped keep me moving and it helped me get up faster when I would fall. Not that I didn't fall a lot, like I've fallen a lot, right? However, that energy for me has been something that I've used as a motivation to propel me forward. Now, here's the downfall. because there's benefits and drawbacks to everything. And in my experience, as I witness people that have the most challenges in life, they're only looking at one side. They want everything to be positive or everything is negative. It doesn't matter how many great things are going on in their life. Most people that are really stuck in being positioned, we talked about being positioned earlier, in one aspect of how things need to be or should be, are the ones that have the biggest challenges, like living and thriving and creating abundantly and freely, right? So for me, my experience with my masculine energy was in a professional context, I was building great businesses. In a personal context, I was detached. I wasn't creating intimacy. Like, I'm not talking about having sex. I'm talking about creating intimacy in relationships with significant others or people that I was dating at the time, and deep, like meaningful relationships, because I was always in this masculine, like, go mode energy. And so women were not attracted to do business with me because I felt too rough, except for the ones that were like me, which was, not a lot of people. and so as I started to look at, there's that saying that when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, we will change. And so what I started to look at is I had created, a relative measure of success personally and professionally. However, I started to see how limited it was. And the reason why it was limited was because I was only standing in the strength and the skill set of the masculine energy that I had developed. And I did not want to look at, explore, or really develop a skill set around how to bring out more of the feminine energy in me, because my fear was, how am I going to get anything done? And so again, through lots of personal development and investing in myself, what I came to discover about the feminine energy, that we all have this masculine feminine energy, is that there is incredible creative power. There is incredible influence that comes with that energy. And there are results that can be created with feminine energy that cannot be created with masculine energy, because feminine energy creates an inclusion with people that does not happen necessarily as much or to the level or extent that happens in like a very just strong masculine get stuff done energy. And so when I started to look at myself and my business and realizing, wow, like I have a vision, and this is, 16 years ago, I have a vision of being a global entrepreneur. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I better figure out how to work with women, and I better figure out how to work with people that think differently, and I better figure out how to work with people from different cultures, and I better figure out how to work with people that are not at all like me. And that doesn't require any of those people changing. That requires me learning the skills and me investing in myself so that I can become that person and take that person into my life and into my business.
Absolutely, 100%. I'm agreeing with everything that you're saying, and I'm like nodding my head. I'm seeing comments, in the chat, like people are like, you sound like you lived my life, like a lot of very, very strong, powerful women in this room. And so I want to ask you, how did you do that? How did you, because everybody's like, yeah, I get it. I understand you and I relate and all that, but like, how do I go from, running my, successful, like, 6-figure, real estate career? How do I go from running my team and putting out fires and, dealing with like possibly legal issues? How do I go from like da 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 da, and then how do I now shift, to care, that, you had a bad day, or that, you didn't sleep well, or you just had a breakup, or what helped you shift it from, go shift results to walking into a meeting or into an interaction with one of your team members and being able to, you know, shift your energy to something that might be more effective in the moment.
Yeah, so I'm going to say I'm very still much in the practice of learning how to do this and building the muscle. Okay, I have in no way, shape, or form have arrived in any of these areas. There's something, you know, ABC. A lot of people will say is always be closing, and for me, ABC is awareness before change. And so I'm constantly looking how to increase my own personal awareness, so that if there's changes that are desperately, you know, it's kind of like when other people are able to see things and you're just not because you're oblivious. You ever have that experience? I'm sure, you know, and they're like, and then you hear like the same feedback from 5 different people outside your significant other. And you're like, oh crap, is my significant other right? Ugh. But that's just simply, it's an awareness conversation, right? So, Rosie, I've invested in, you know, personal development that I have referenced multiple times. I chose to do that through a company called PSI Seminars, which stands for Personal Success Institute. I did that, my first class back in March of 2006. I subsequently went through all of their advanced trainings and the initial class, which you can retake for free anytime it's offered. After that, I have done more than 30 times. So because I know that mastery is about mastery of the basics, and mastery in this context is a mastery of oneself, right? And so until I become a master of myself, am I really, like, everything else is going to be relative, and even mastery is relative because that can always be improving and changing. However, what I committed myself to was I made a commitment in March of 2006 when I was in that first course that I would remain committed to personal and professional development for the rest of my life, so that I could continue to elevate my levels of personal awareness, so that I could continue to become the most effective and best version of myself, for myself and for the people that that interact with me and the experiences that I would have. So if you were to talk about one thing that's been, and this is, I'm getting to the point of answering your question now, outside of the how do we do it, like, it's been through a commitment and a rigorous training and practice of that. And I don't know of a better place to grab those skills or do that work than with that company, which is why we still actively introduce people to it that are looking to grow and expand themselves, with no compensation other than the joy of seeing what they become and what they create as a result of getting those skills and tools to master themselves and become the best version of themselves. So there is one thing though, Rosie, and if you were to say what that one tool is, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And I remember, like, initially when I would hear this word, I would cringe, because this is me living in my masculine energy before I've done any personal development work. When I would hear the word empathy, I would cringe, because it was like, give them a snotty Kleenex and let's sit around and have a pity party and, you know, celebrate weakness. That sounds really bitchy as I'm hearing the words come out of my mouth, but that's how I thought about that word. And what I have discovered over time is a totally different relationship with that word. And it progressed, right? So initially it was like, gosh, you know, empathy, if I'm not going to have empathy for someone else, I'm not going to have it for myself. Oops, that's kind of a problem. Well, for somebody that beats themselves up regularly and nothing they ever do is good enough, even though the rest of the world feels like it's amazing, having some empathy for oneself is kind of a missing link that becomes important at some point of a journey when you're working on becoming your best self. So that was that kind of initial into that word. But then I would find, man, okay, now I'm feeling this, and now I'm feeling sorry for myself, which is exactly what I was resisting about this whole word to begin with. And so there was just like this, and this might sound funny, however, this is my masculine energy self, like black or whiteness of like one end of the spectrum, when there's this whole beautiful shades of gray that exist in between, right? And so that tendency to go this or that, being positioned and flexible, and then creating this experience that's miserable based on being positioned and inflexible, again, just like resurfacing and going, okay, something to learn here. So where I've landed with it, which is, it feels like a very healthy place in a relationship with that word as a tool, empathy, is that if I am going to become more effective personally and professionally, empathy plays a great role. And the role of empathy is for me in that moment to be able to fully step out, if this is empathy towards another person, of my own perspectives, of me wanting to like hear what they're saying and fix it, and like really for 5 seconds live in the energy and the feeling that what that other person is saying or experiencing is their whole reality and their whole truth, and that is what they are experiencing in that moment. And instead of immediately going to like, how do we move out of that, and how do we fix it, and how do we get into solution and keep moving, which is that driver side of me, is to pause for a moment in time and realize what it must feel like to that person. Even if I can see a different perspective, even if I've got what I think is a solution to the way out of it, to just be with another person long enough in that moment so that they, like, the most important thing I think in human connection is to feel like someone gets us. Like, I understand what you're going through, and whether I'm going through that same thing or not, I get it, right? And to me, that's empathy. And then at the same time, the balanced part of that is great. How long do you want to stay where you're at?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if that is, I need the rest of the day to hold myself up under a blanket with some popcorn in front of the TV, great. Go take the rest of the day, but you don't get to do anything else other than be in the miserable spot that you're in for the rest of the day, 100% committed to that. And what I found is most people get so fed up in that feeling that they want to move out of it faster than taking an entire day to do it. And then it's like, okay, great. Now, when you're done with that, let's come back and let's have a conversation about what's next and what you're ready to move into, right? So that word empathy is huge for me in how I manage my own energy with myself, and then how I attempt to be more effective, like constantly being more effective with other people. And when dealing with very masculine energy men, it's not the, sometimes it's not the squishy, they want to sit around and feel it. My experience of that is like they want to move, and it's a whole, it's a similar process, but it's a very different process, right? And so that again is individual to individual, not male or female, but empathy was the word, and PSI seminars was the vehicle.
Yep. And I think we put the link in the chat box, should be there. If not, it'll be there in just a few seconds. So if you guys want to check that out, and, interestingly enough, this is kind of how we ended up going into relationship, because Casey did so much work. She's married to, many of you guys know Rick Geha. And so Rick Geha, in the company, we're with, he is the person who introduced me to the company, and that's how this whole thing came about. So I'm really thankful to your commitment, to this work, Casey, because it has, trickled into so many parts of, my life and everything. And as you're explaining that word empathy, my go-to response to that word is when I think of empathy, it translates a little bit to work for me, and when I say that, because, it means I have to take a step back, a deep breath, and I have to really work on, let me understand, like you said, that person, their shoes, their feelings, their perspective, what are they experiencing? So a word that helps me transition from, go, let's choose and move. Okay, you had a bad day. Okay, that's right. Put it away. Let's just keep going. So transition from the go energy to the empathy is grace. And so I just want to throw that in your toolbox, guys, that if I think, let me give this person grace, or let me give myself grace, because some days I'm not going to get up and be at the gym at exactly 5 a.m. Sometimes I'm going to mess up a conversation. Sometimes I'm going to, whatever it is, it's just, first, start with grace. And if you can give yourself grace, then you can give other people grace in their, moments of weakness, if you will. And then for me, that helps me transition into empathy. Like, okay, let me give them grace. Kind of pissing me off right now, or whatever it is. But yeah, I'm just going to give him grace.
Not me.
Yeah. You know, Casey and I have had some great conversations, but you know what? We're both committed to, you know, being better versions of ourselves. And so we have great outcomes, you know, but yes, let me give him grace, you know, and then let me stop and think, okay, how is she feeling right now? You know, how is he feeling right now? How's my child feeling right now? You know, what are they experiencing? What's important to them? How are they looking at this? All that stuff. But the pause, the one that gets me off of the go mode is that, like, let's start with grace. And then we can kind of dig a little bit deeper, right? And then I can work on myself. Because like you said, Casey, the work here is on yourself, you know, and it's coming from a place of taking 100% accountability for what has occurred or what is occurring. And if you come from a place of 100% accountability, if you can own, you know, the fact that, you know, this situation was very much created by your, you know, your influence, your participation, your interaction, or whatever it is, then you can also, you know, improve, right? And then you can, you know, deepen the relationships. You can better the business negotiations or whatnot. But definitely, let's have a little bit of a conversation about that, Casey, in terms of accountability. And I want to say this because many like you and Rick, you know, you as a woman, very powerful woman, you know, been incredibly successful worldwide, right, with the projects that you've done and the businesses that you've been in. And now you meet your partner, your significant other, and it would not be an open and honest and supportive conversation to everybody in the room if we didn't talk about the relationship that, you know, that we carry, those of us that have, you know, a significant other at home, right? And so again, you're in the office, you're running full speed, you get home, and so, you know, if you've got a very, you know, well, let's just talk about that. Like, how do you, how does the strong businesswoman also either attract and or have a successful relationship with your significant partner who, you know, maybe has more of a, it might have a little bit more of a feminine energy or might not. But I'll ask you to talk about your experience with Rick Geha, and, you know, tell us how this whole thing came about and how do you navigate, because you're both very powerful, successful individuals. However, you do have different styles or different ways of being.
Yeah, for sure. So again, let's take this off of a male female to an energy. Let's go back to like a masculine energy, feminine energy kind of conversation, because there could be women that are on this call that are in relationship with other women, right? And so it's not the physical DNA piece of it. It is definitely the energy that goes with the human. And there's men that are on this call too, right? So back in this context of masculine energy, feminine energy, I think there's two things, right? One is this understanding, which I got introduced. It's a crazy story. Do we have time for me to detour on a little story? I promise it'll be entertaining and will be of value. Okay. So Rick is my second husband. He is my last husband. The first husband, I got married in October of 1999, and I had been married less than 30 days. And that husband and I went to see our chiropractor together. And he looked down and he said to us, I'm going to recommend that you both read this book, because if you don't, you will not stay married. And I was like, you're my chiropractor, not my therapist. What the heck is going on, right? However, he was a very intuitive man. And what he was very clear on was the relationship of energy and people, and knowing that under those energies is a whole bunch of other stuff. And so the book that he was talking about at the time, this is October 1999, used to be a PBS series. And the book had like many revisions that had been updated over time. The name of the book is Getting the Love That You Want. The author is Harville Hendrix. And Hendrix is the spelling. So Getting the Love You Want, the author is Harville Hendrix. And my husband at the time had no interest in reading a book or doing the exercises at the end of the book. Not happening. I read the book. I'm 24 years old. I'm like, this is a little weird. It is interesting, but it's BS. You know, I don't know how he's had like all these revisions, whatever. I read the book anyway. And then as I came back to what played out in my life in that relationship and experience, it was exactly what was in the book. And so the premise is that as humans, our caregivers are never going to give us everything that we need. Those are going to create wounds. And we do not have the emotional intelligence or the ability to have a skill set to navigate that as someone that's developing as a child. And I'm going to call child all the way up to 18 because that's where 95% of that is shaped. And so what happens is we will then become adults and we go into our lives and we will pick people to be in relationships with that mirror all of what we felt the most endeared to. I'll call those the positive traits of our caregivers, the people that raised us. It could be grandparents, it could be parents. And then we also have, this is where the flexibility part that we talked about earlier comes into play. We also have this resistance and all of these wounds that come from all of the needs that we perceived were not met or those hurts. And so we go into our adult relationship lives and we will pick, not intellectually pick, everything about who we're attracted to and what we're attracted to. We'll pick a person that has the package that is closest to our familial family traits, the ones that we are most loved and supported by, and the ones that we are most challenged by, so that as adults, we develop skills that we never learned as kids or got as kids, so that we can navigate and actually heal and repair all of those little kiddo wounds that all of us have, that when they come into our life, like run everything amok. They make us lose our minds. They make us throw tantrums. They make us go stark raving mad. They make us do things that don't make sense, all because it's being driven from that piece. So fortunately, that was part of my personal development process. Although I have to say that while I got the awareness piece in the first marriage, and then what happens is if you don't do that with that person, then you'll just go be in another relationship and it will be a different face with a similar set of things that will arise. Oh, why? Because it was never about that person anyway. It's because it's about your own stuff that you have going on inside. So I, like best relationship book that I've ever read, and was obviously very fully invested in how to be better in relationship. But what I learned about myself is I got awareness about what mine were, or are, they never go away, awareness about what mine are, so that I can create a different relationship with them. Rosie, what you were talking about, being 100% responsible. That's part one. Part two is that then as I embark on this journey in personal development, and that is designed to trigger a lot of those old things so that I can look at them again and create a different experience or relationship with them, then that was more work on myself. So Rick is actually the first person that I have ever been in relationship with. And that relationship started in 2008. So I was 33 years old at the time. He is the first person that I was ever attracted to that I could create a healthy, intimate, connected, loving relationship with, because everyone that I was attracted to before was really just to bring up all that other stuff and all that work that I had to do. And so literally the type of human being that I was attracted to shifted as I did that work on myself. And those things started to line up. So that's number one. Number two then is, okay, here's this person, and oh my gosh, I remember we're dating, and this will tell you just how deep some of those things were. We're dating, it's like 5 months. He had been, married for 22 years, and then he was in a relationship for 3 years with someone else. And I was just in the process of losing everything, and I'm thinking, if I'm going to be in a relationship, this is time, this is emotion, this is energy, all of those things need to go to my business right now. I do not have time for any men in my life. However, he was a great human being. So we had committed to having a non-committed relationship, which means like there's no expectations around me. If he could date other people, I wasn't dating other people because I didn't have any time to do that, like whatever. So that's where that relationship started. But in the process of that, he's a very different person than I am. So we're standing outside on a Starbucks one night before he's getting ready to leave on a business trip. And he's asking me this question. He's like, well, tell me what you're feeling right now. And literally my throat seized up, like closed to where I couldn't breathe, because my experience about like talking about my feelings and what was really in those like most vulnerable pieces from my previous relationship was that they were invalidated, told I was stupid, or explained why I was wrong. So I just basically shut off feeling and went into my skill set around masculine energy of like, let's just get shit done and do business. And so I did not have any muscle around this, or, skill set really developed. And so now here this man is physical, man, that he definitely has masculine energy. However, he has a lot of feminine energy and he's wanting to talk about my feelings. And I'm like, ugh. So that was my, journey of like doing that work. And the more I did it, the more I built a skill set around that. But there was another tool that came into play that became very helpful during that time. And that was, well, first off, Rosie, when you were talking before and asking me the question, and I started laughing out loud and kind of put my head down, and it was in this context of personal development, what I flashed on was being on a flight. And I saved the most important conversations for being on an airplane when he's trapped and can go nowhere. We were on a flight home from a business trip for my business from Utah. And he had done the first session. He had done the basic with PSI seminars, and he had not gone on to the advanced courses. And so we're, he was gonna, and at some point, but I just don't see taking a week off my business to do that right now. I don't know when I will. And so that conversation in that airplane was like, I don't see how we can actually have a relationship if you're not going to go do that work. And he's like, are you telling me that you will break up with me if I don't go do the advanced courses there, and that our relationship has no future? And I'm like, yeah. Because I knew how important it was based on the work that I had been doing on myself. So I had a personal awareness for me, and I also had some awarenesses of him that he did not have of himself. And that was not going to work long term. However, what worked in the short term was a book that is, what's the name of it? That the 5 love languages, right? And so when I learned that 2 of his love languages are physical touch and words of affirmation, it hit me. It's like, wow, whenever he talks to people, he has the greatest relationships. He has the greatest influence. He cares about people. He remembers the last conversation he had with that person, even if it was 2 years ago. And he is always finding something in the context of words of affirmation to acknowledge or say great about whoever he's in front of, because that was one of his love languages. Now, to me, when he would say that stuff, I'm like, oh, he's a trained salesperson. He's full of shit, because who could ever think that many nice things about that many other people? This is my like jaded, undeveloped, embarrassed that I just said that in front of a group of people I don't know self. However, that's what I would think. But when I realized that those things were true for him, what started to come together is, okay, I am in now a relationship with someone that has an entirely different skill set than I do, and is driven by different things that I'm driven by, but ultimately we want the same thing, which is partnership, intimacy, connection, and to create something together. And so, I started doing different things. Like, it was a lot of work for me. However, I would look for things that I could verbally acknowledge, and that was a game changer. Whereas before, like, we could work in different sections of wherever we were at all day long, and he would feel so disconnected. However, if I now get up and I walk through the room and I touch him on the shoulder and say hello, game changer. So it's like, and I don't care about that stuff, because I'm like, you're distracting me because I was focused on something, and now you have come into the room and touched me, but I started to change in the process of that as well, realizing that I could live in and work within some of that feminine energy to keep connection while still getting things done. And that as I started to step into more of that feminine energy, it helped soften me as a person, so that when I was going back to the tasks of getting what I needed to get done, I brought a softer version of me. I don't want to say soft, not soft like weak, inviting, and a more inviting version of myself that, you know, I would want to be around, and the people that were on the other end of the experience with me would want to be around more so than the other version of me that I revered because of, you know, how I got stuff done. So that it's always a dance. And it continues to be a dance. We've been together for 13 years. However, we have just danced a lot together. He went and invested in all that personal development himself. And so the conversations that we have are different than they would be otherwise, because we're speaking the same language, even though it's from very different perspectives and very different experiences.
Guys, I don't know if you guys caught all of that, but you probably did. Probably caught like 25%. I just wanted to kind of like, you know, let you guys know. So the Facebook group that we're putting and hosting all of these great lady conversations, it's called BAWS, BAWS, which stands for Badass Women Succeeding, right? Like a boss, right? And the recording will be in there if you go into the, like Norma says, I was trying not to cry, but now I'm crying. That's okay, Norma, we're going to give you grace, right? So I wanted to just invite you guys to go to the chat box. Megan, if you could put in the link to the Facebook group again. Again, this has been, you know, like a 5-year plus project to just create a space where, you know, we could connect as women, business women who are succeeding in you know, in our space, and then also be able to collaborate and learn. I knew that on this session, we've got so much value. One, you know, the 5 love languages, there's a book right there. We'll put the link in the chat box too. The other book, which interestingly doesn't have a whole lot of reviews on Audible, but we put the link in there as well, which is Getting the Love You
Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendrix.
Getting the Love You Want. And then we also put the link into Sci Seminars, which, you know, I will attest to as well, because I you know, I did the different levels of workshop, and the first one is absolutely an eye-opener, and then we moved into you know, deeper work, like 7-day retreats, and then women's work and the women's leadership, and, you know, so on and so forth. And there's a ton of resources out there. It's just personal experience that we're sharing with you guys. If you want to create change and to create growth in 2022, then, you know, unfortunately, we are not born with handbooks, and we don't get to like be 40 years old and this is what you need to do when you're 40, and this is what you need to do when you're 50, and, you know, all that good stuff. We have to seek that information and continue to invest in ourselves so that, you know, we can improve, you know, all the relationships in all spaces. We didn't probably have all of these challenges, Casey. I mean, this is just my own idea, but, you know, if you went back, you know, 100 years, you know, even maybe 50 or 60 years, you know, you didn't have so many women in the workplace, right? And if they were in, you know, more submissive, you know, positions, if you will. And so, you know, as our culture has changed and you know, our role has expanded, then I think that the best thing that you can do is really invest in how can I grow as a human, right? How can I grow as a human? And then the advantage that we have is that we, as strong, successful leaders, obviously have traits that we have invested a lot of time in. And then, you know, we were born genetically with some of those other traits, you know, that we have as women. And so to be able to kind of utilize that full gamut of tools that we have, and move those into our relationships and into our business, I think would only lead to, you know, you guys kicking assets, right? Or us all kicking assets in 2022. So Casey, I just want to thank you because I knew that having this conversation with you, and it is a very candid one, that it was just going to be jam-packed with so much information. We have a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to see, does anybody have any questions? And before that, Casey, you have something you want to add? Yes.
Yeah, I have one gift before questions, and that is something that I want to leave everyone to walk away from this conversation with, and that is the fact that you are a leader. And I'm going to tell you why. A leader is somebody that has someone following them. So if you have kids, you're a leader. If you have a pet, you're a leader. And how you develop out your leadership is really will determine the influence that you have. And the influence that you have will impact your business. It will impact how you influence your significant other. It will impact how you influence your children. I think that if there was one thing that I could say to what we'll call a group of women, regardless of its masculine, feminine energy, or in any other context that someone would sit, is that embracing that you are a leader is not something that I see done a lot amongst women. And when you embrace the fact that you are a leader by definition of how I just defined it, and then you start to ask yourself the questions, well, if I'm a leader and I have people that are following me, whether those are my children or I'm the person that someone calls, when they're having a bad day because they need help or support, or I just put 6 into escrow this week. All of those things are evidence of influence and leadership. And so the question that I would invite each of you to walk into 2022 with is, what am I committed to personally to grow and expand my influence as a leader, and have a plan of action? Like, there's no wrong way to go about it. There's no wrong way to do it. However, in this context of awareness before change, the awareness might be for you an awareness for the first time that, like, you're a leader. Okay, great. Where are you going? And getting clear on where you're going. And when you're clear on where you're going as a leader, then people will automatically follow. You'll have the ones that follow by default. However, if you want to really create something as an entrepreneur or in business, being clear on where you're going as a leader is a really important thing, and how you're going to invest in yourself to grow and develop your own leadership. That's what there is to do.
I love it, Casey. And I think, just as you were speaking, you're saying you are a leader. I listen intently to the advice of, anybody who's done great things. And I know, Casey, you've done such great things. So as you were speaking, I was like, okay, she's talking to me. Right. And I'm like, okay, I'm a leader. Right. And then the word that came up, I mean, I gave you guys one word, which is grace, right? Give yourself grace. But something else that I know that, I see, and I'm guilty of myself, is also give yourself credit, right? When I see a bunch of guys hanging around, they're just talking about how awesome they are. A lot of the times, there's no problem with them. Like, yeah, well, I did this and I did that and I lifted this and, I crushed that, right? However, I don't see that we're as comfortable and have as much fun with that space, so give yourself grace and also give yourself credit, so that you can kind of illuminate, the awesome leader that you are, that we all are here. So any questions that you guys might have, I do want to let you know that we are hosting our next one in January. I have the date here, Megan, if you're here. Do you have that date on the calendar? If you could type it in really quickly. Our next series, you will all who registered be invited. It will be featuring another woman, getting insights from, their journey, their success, and being able to kind of learn, right? This is a learning, collaborative, supportive space. And just really excited to do this in 2022. This is part of my, part of my empowerment thing. Like, okay, You know, is this valuable? Did you guys get some value out of this? Can I get a hell yeah? Awesome. I don't think that we have any questions. So Casey, any final thoughts? Thank you so much. Thank you for being here and supporting.
Rosie, thank you for the invitation to be here. You and I are connected in multiple ways, personal development and businesses. And I really appreciate that you are someone that throws yourself in the deep end of the pool as a leader, and then without always knowing or having it figure it out, you're willing to jump in and do that and figure it out along the way, which is where some of the most incredible things get created. And so I really appreciate that about you. And that you're also someone that is committed to bringing people with you. You've got a very wide net, and are willing to, like, anyone that wants to learn and to grow and to become the best version of themselves. Like, you are a person that is an incredible human being to have in your corner, in my corner. And so I want to thank you for who you are, and all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just lifted for the day, maybe the week. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, and look forward to seeing you guys next month. Again, this is a monthly series, and you know, we're going to do great things together. So you guys have an amazing day. Give yourself grace and give yourself credit. We'll see you later. Thank you. Join the group, BOSS, BAWS, BOSS group. Thank you.
Thank you.